Good evening, everyone. We're going to call tonight's meeting to order, and we will begin with an approval of tonight's agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Stevens and Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? And that is carried. Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we had no closed session. We're moving straight into the open session, and we will begin, as we always do, with the singing of our national anthem. I'll ask you to rise if you're able, please.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
We would like to acknowledge the treaty lands and territory of the Williams Treaty Nations and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We also recognize that Dufferin County is the traditional territory of the Wendat and the Haudenosaunee and is home to many Indigenous people today. Tonight's meeting is being aired on public television and or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of tonight's meeting. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Please remain muted until the chair requests comments or questions from the public. We have no rise in reports and no adoptions of previous minutes, so we will start with question period. Any member connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Was there anybody on the line with questions today? There is somebody on the line. If you've got a question, you can go ahead and press *6 to unmute. Whoever's joined us by phone, do you have a question that you'd like to ask during question period? Okay, we will turn it over to the gallery. Was there any members of the gallery wishing to ask a question tonight?
Good evening, everyone. I'm not going to give you my name tonight. You guys have it on record already.
We still need it for the record, please, for the minute.
I did it last night. You need it again tonight?
Yes, please. That's procedure.
Anyway, my name is Nick Gristo. I live on 20 Paula Court, L9W5V1.
Go ahead, Mr. Gristo.
Anyway, my question here tonight, I was watching with very interesting last night during the operating budget. And I think only one motion came to the forefront to lower the budget, which wasn't very much at all. We're still over 6%. I hope that tonight I will see lots more motion coming from this council to lower the budget. So that is my way of thinking. Because when I was sitting around this table, if I didn't like something, right away I asked for a motion, either to delete it or to keep it. So I hope you will get going with the motions tonight, instead of discussing over and over again and do nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gristo. Is there any other questions from members of the gallery?
Hi
Name and
there,
address
I'm
for the
on
record.
the line there. Is that okay?
Yeah, go
Hi
ahead.
there. Sorry there, I was on mute before. My name is Mark Middleton. I'm on Zionist Street here in Orangeville. Just wanted to comment on, I know yesterday the deputy mayor asked the public for suggestions on essentially how to combat, I guess, creating revenue for the town. And I know he had highlighted, you know, I guess having the towns outside of Orangeville pay for obviously utilizing our resources here. And I think that was a great idea. To kind of highlight that a bit more would be probably to have paid parking at Alder Arena for non-residents. Potentially could be a great way of generating revenue and maybe increasing rates for outside of Orangeville residents who utilize the pool and the arena. You know, I think you guys host a lot of tournaments there. It'd be a great way to generate some income for the town. And, you know, I wanted to ask, do we know if we're in the black or are we in the red when it comes to Alder Arena? Are we in the midst of paying that off fairly quickly in the next 5 years? You know, and are there other revenue tools that the town can look at in increasing, maybe paying that off sooner so that we could get to looking at Tony Rose potentially? Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your questions, Mr. Middleton. I'm not sure if Ms. Savage wants to weigh in there briefly. Okay, what's that? Yeah, Alder pool. Alder in general was your question, Mr. Middleton, or just the pool portion?
Yeah, just as far as, you know, we've got, what was it, $12 million? Is that going to be paid off in 5 years? Do we have revenue tools in place that you guys are working on to pay it off, say, in 4 or 3, so that we could look at Tony Rose a little bit sooner than I think you guys had highlighted 2027, which, I mean, it'd be nice to look at that sooner, but again, there's budget constraints, I'd imagine, when it comes to that.
Yes, there definitely is. I'll turn it over to Ms. Savage here briefly, who can answer that question about Alder.
Thank you, Mayor Post. To Mr. Middleton, we have, I believe that you're right, there's some outstanding fine.
Just ever so quickly, I think that's a great question about the debt. And there is a page in here on debt, which I, of course, don't have at my fingertips. But as I recall, I was so excited actually to see, as someone who's followed it for a long period of time, we owed a ton of money on Alder Street Arena when it was first built. And by memory serves, it was 23 or 24 million, which we would never get done today. It'd be over 100 million if we were to build it today. But that's almost paid off. The Humber Lands, which was bought ages ago, that's almost paid off. There's some properties that we owe with the BIA. Those mortgages are next to none too. And these are all things that are growing over time. So, you know, it's not all negative Nelly. There is some great things that are going on, and our assets are appreciating, and our debt on these key assets are going down, and we'll be able to utilize those for monetary gain at some point, which will benefit the town. So I think it's good.
Yep. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thank you again, Mr. Middleton. We'll take your thoughts away with us. Thank you. Mr. Ugolini, go ahead. Name and address for the record, please. We just need your mic on. Give us 1 sec here.
I can talk louder.
There you go. Go ahead.
Rick Ugolini, Cedar Drive, Orangeville. First off, I'd like to apologize about my last comment last night. It really wasn't called for, and I do apologize for that. And it may not be the last one, just to let you know. Deputy Mayor, last night you mentioned, you know, how can we help you as citizens try and get some of this tax down? And that's why I brought up 3 things last night: the jump track, the fire hall, and the dog track. Yeah. And that's why I brought it up. Try and save us some money. Okay. And apparently I understand now about the jump track. There's more involved in that than the public was known about. But it's still a lot of money for a pile of dirt. Now, also, I don't get a chance to ask questions like being here at the beginning, you know, and you sit through all this and, you know, you find out things that you didn't know before, but you can't ask anything. And the question period sucks. And this is my opinion and most other people's opinion too, because being at the beginning, you can't ask any questions about what happened during the night. So this is why I'm bringing the stuff up that happened last night, because I couldn't do it. Now, to get on with why I'm here tonight is it seems the town always wants the most expensive and the best of everything. And how does that work out for us? We are the most heavily taxed town or city by population in Ontario. And I have figures here. I did some research, and if you want to hear the figures, I'll tell them to you. I've got lots of time here. Actually, a minute. Now, you want to talk about who is close to us. We are number 26 on the list with a population of 30,954, according to the stats this year. And then you get Caledon. They're number 11 on the list with a population of 83,348. Halton Hills, 64,050, and that's number 9. Newmarket, 90,000, and so on. Aurora, the closest to our population, 62,000, okay, and they are number 8. Why are we the most heavily taxed town in this province by population?
I'm going to turn it over to CAO Smith, who will address some of that because there's multiple factors that go into it.
There's multiple is an understatement of factors of comparison. So it's easy to look at one sense. I can give you just one example. In the Halton Hills, the police is funded through your county tax, not your town tax. In other communities, library is funded regionally, not through your town tax. So if you're serious and want to do a comparison, a real comparison of tax rates, there's ways to do it. And I'm not sure your source data or the source data that's used, but there are reliable instruments that help gauge different tax levels.
Thank you, CAO Smith.
Now we were going to build a fire hall for $30 million. Why are other communities building fire halls for almost the same footage in that and 4 doors for under $10 million? Why do we have to spend $30 million?
We aren't spending $30 million
I
on a
understand
fire
that now.
hall, so yeah. Thank you for your question, Mr. Ugolini. Your time is up, so thank you. Was there anybody else in the gallery wishing to ask a question tonight? Go ahead. Name and address for the record as well.
Thank you, Mayor Post. As David Waugh to Amanda. Just to your question last night to Deputy Mayor Taylor, a couple of ideas or questions. Just I guess on the development charge side, I know that's a challenge right now that those funds are not coming in anymore, and we need to see development speed up to be able to expand the tax base faster. I'm just wondering if there's much, and perhaps this question should be more directed at staff, much precedent or research with respect to trying to incentivize developers to act quickly with, lead with the carrot as opposed to the stick, right? So that we see less or fewer projects sort of stuck in limbo, either due to the interest rate environment or housing prices, that type of thing. If the price is going to go up, or if they can take advantage of a tax break or a fee charge break, whatever the case may be. I'm not sure what sort of policy levers you might have at your disposal, but just some kind of incentive to get things moving. I'm just curious if there's much precedent for that and what the research would say.
CAO Smith.
Big, broad question. There are tools that we can use. The development charges, though, are highly regulated, and they are something, actually ours are under appeal, that developers choose. Council always has a tool of a CIP, a community improvement plan, for a very defined or focused area, or specifically if you're looking for something like affordable housing, you could incent through that way. We like development. We like appropriate development. We like development that's good for our community at the right time for our community. And we work regularly with developers to try and advance that. They're in the business to advance their development. It works for both. Unfortunately, in Orangeville, our development has been incredibly slow over the last 5 years, less than 1%. On average, over the last 5 years, it's been 0.8%, which is very, very, very low. And we're working hard to increase that, because we know that more development is beneficial to our community.
Thank you.
One other thing, just very quickly.
Sure.
Just as far as potential cost savings, I don't want anyone to think I'm coming after their job. So I'm not picking on anybody in particular here. It's just a random thought because we had snow the other day and we had the sidewalk snow clearing guy go by, 6 o'clock in the morning. And moving to Orangeville recently from downtown Toronto, I was blown away that here in Orangeville, I mean, we do get a little bit more snow, but that those things go by just about every single morning. And sometimes maybe even twice a day. It's phenomenal service, but that's the type of thing where I would think, as a community, as a neighbor, I would be more than happy to step up. And I realize that not everyone has this capability, from a mobility or access perspective, and I empathize with that. But, as neighbors in the community, shovel the sidewalk in front of your house, and we still have that service, I suppose. But that's just one area that comes to mind for me, having seen them go by my house the other day, that maybe there's an opportunity for some savings to pull back.
There was actually recently a committee put together that looked at sidewalk clearing in 2014 to 2018, and it was determined during that term of council that there would be really no savings to eliminating that service. So the work has already been done on that, and it's continued to be a valuable service that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I figured it was.
It has been looked at recently, but I appreciate your thought. Thank you, Mr. Waugh.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the gallery tonight? Okay. Oh, Deputy Mayor, yep.
I applaud everybody who came forward tonight. I do think there's a couple things that should be called out, and I'm just being too blunt, but the very fact that the Facebook warriors, and if you're watching right now or you're going to go on tomorrow, are sitting at home on their little thing and weighing in and being all silly like they understand all the things, and there's nobody here. I don't get that. It doesn't make any sense. If you truly gave a damn, you would be here tonight and you'd have input into your town at an important time. So those that are here and offering suggestions, I applaud you. I do just want to talk quickly to the development charges piece. Full on, I'm in favor of development. We should be developing. I can't wait to have Broadway change. Broadway, to me, should look entirely different than it does. It should gentrify. It'll make a big difference to the tax base. It'll make a big difference to the town. But one of the issues, like you can go through it all, and they're emerging now. Councillor Andrews and I were just talking about them, and I jotted down quickly. The exchange rate is projected to go to $1.51. We buy most of our products from the south, right? So that's a massive issue. Investors want a return on their investment. Why would they invest in something unless they're going to get an ROI? It makes no sense. And at this point, the dollars don't work. The cost of capital, it includes interest rates, and yes, interest rates are coming down, but it made no sense over the last 4 years. Why would you borrow money to invest in something that's going to give you an ROI when you're going to pay all your profits out in interest? It doesn't make any sense. Cost of goods, just to get steel, to get different items and brought over here have gone up over 40%. And then there's the expertise piece. It's very, very difficult to get trades. So all of those things are against us. Plus we have no land. It's right in the budget document, and I wanted to call it out last night. It talks about expanding our boundaries. We need more land. We need more development. We need more things to happen here. And all these things are very, very difficult to have happen. So I applaud the question. I just think it's worthwhile talking about it. And I also, if I could, Your Worship, the whole idea of somebody coming in here and saying that council was thinking about spending $30 million on a fire hall, it's insulting. At no time did any one of us ever say that we'd spend $30 million. We put the brakes on that awfully quickly. We all inputted. Staff didn't say it either. This is not a bunch of idiots sitting up here thinking we're going to spend like drunken sailors. So it's just not true. Anyway, that's my diatribe for tonight.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to respond to the one resident that highlighted about alternatives to aggressively supporting the needs of affordable housing. As CEO Smith very clearly identified some of the challenges and how things are in fact playing out. As the chair of the Affordable Housing Task Force, as I ended up asking for the general public to come out to our meeting on Thursday, we are certainly looking at input from all different levels. And, from a high level, federal government's going to be making an announcement, part of their state of the budget coming up later this week, or is it early next? And they're talking about providing some incentives for those for basement apartments. And so raising that loan threshold from $40,000 to $80,000 because of the costs to actually do the construction. Not everybody wants to be a landlord. Not everybody wants to have an additional dwelling unit within their property. But those that are, we are looking at ways of supporting that. And I think when we come to, I guess, next year in the third quarter with a report with this Affordable Housing Task Force, we'll come up with some solutions. Even a few weeks ago, I spoke about options that are in fact being used in other communities, such as the City of Barrie for their community improvement plan. We're not there yet in this community, but at the same time, we are looking at solutions, and I think they're going to be the right solutions for Orangeville.
Thank you, Councillor Anders. Everybody else good? Okay, so we will move into presentations, petitions, and delegations, and I would like to invite up Cheryl Braun, our Chief Financial Officer, to talk about the operating budget. Before I turn the mic over to Ms. Braun, though, I'm going to turn over to CAO Smith for his opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Post. I appreciate that. And I will be brief. My son Connor is a municipal-ophile, and I just made up that word. He watches our council meetings every night, every time we have them. And when I get home after them, he asks me about the items and we discuss them as a early 20-year-old would. And he usually gives me some pretty candid feedback on my responses to questions. Connor is also a former town of Orangeville employee. Years before I worked for the town, both my children were summer students, both had a very positive experience. That is where they learned that municipal government is a service industry. Our organization is primarily a service provider. We don't make widgets. We provide services to the public and to each other. And to do that, we need people. And it takes people to drive snowplows, teach swimming, cut grass, attract new development, pay bills, work with our community groups, facilitate council and committee meetings, maintain websites, answer questions, put out fires, and yes, plan budgets. We are incredibly fortunate. I hear from members of council how strong our staff team is right now. I heard that last night. With the amount of churn happening in many sectors, including the municipal one, Orangeville is very fortunate to be at a really good spot attracting talent when we have vacancies. It takes investment to keep us on this crest to continue to be an employer of choice. Investments in areas like training, development opportunities, proper tools and resources to do the job, and recognition. All these things are included in our operating budget. It is also a lot easier and more affordable to maintain rather than fix something. Through council's support and leadership, our citizens benefit by having a smart, strong staff. How to manage the OPP rebate will be decided tonight. And rebate not be the right word, but that's the word I've chosen. Council has three options, and I guarantee you will pick the right one. I don't know what it is, but you'll pick the right one. I'm highlighting the OPP because it's important to say again that the decision to move to the OPP is saving our taxpayers millions of dollars a year. In discussion later, let's not forget this fact and be thankful for the previous decision. The community needs the understanding, notwithstanding this year's increase, which is large, we are still saving millions of dollars. Thank you for your leadership last night. We look forward to tonight's discussion, and our format will be very similar to what we followed last night. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Smith. And before I turn it over to Ms. Braun, I do need a motion to extend beyond the 5 minutes. Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Sherwood, all in favor? And that is carried. Ms. Braun, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Post, and good evening, council, staff, and members of the public. Welcome to tonight's budget discussion, where we will hopefully conclude with approval of the 2025 consolidated budget. Last evening, after some productive discussions, council approved a 10-year capital program that is strategically aligned with community priorities and attempts to start to address the state of repair of town infrastructure in a sustainably funded way. Tonight, we will shift our focus to the operating budget, highlighting major budget drivers and proposed service level change requests that will allow staff to deliver town services in a manner that meets community expectations and needs. The agenda for today includes an overview of the 2025 consolidated budget position that we have updated to reflect the decisions from last night. Then, similarly to the approach taken to the capital presentation yesterday, our general managers will be walking through their divisional budgets, highlighting some of the pressures and service level requests. The CAO and myself will look after the oversight and corporate-wide areas of administration, council, committees, and corporate allocations. And with the announcement in late November from the province for the temporary relief for with respect to the OPP costs in 2025 only, staff have prepared budget approval resolutions for each alternative outlined in the accompanying staff report for council's consideration. Before we dive in, I'd like to echo some of the comments that CAO Smith made, highlighting some of the themes of the 2025 operating budget tonight. First is obviously the significant increases in OPP costs for 2025 that were discussed last week, and I do have a couple of slides near the end of the presentation on the OPP. The second is that it does take people to deliver the services that residents of Orangeville need and want, and staffing costs are one of the largest budget components in our operating budget. Staff compensation, so that's salaries, wages, and benefits, total approximately 30.7 million of the total 73.5 million in operating expenditure in our operating budget. So that's over 45%. And lastly, we'd like to acknowledge that the town is trying to right the ship when it comes to asset renewal and the state of good repair of our assets. Staff believe that the best approach to one-time funding opportunities or expenditure offsets in the budget is to set them aside in capital reserves. This will achieve two outcomes: more funding needed for capital and avoiding the need to add back the budget capacity in the future years. So this slide does provide a continuity of the tax-supported budget position, taking into account the proceedings from yesterday. The 2025 budget as tabled proposed a tax levy of almost 44.9 million, which is an increase of just shy of $3 million, or a tax impact of 6.6% net of assessment growth. With the adjustments from yesterday for the removal of the fire hall furniture project and the deferral of the fire hall master plan, the direct tax levy funding requirements is reduced by $125,000. As a result, the starting point for today is a tax levy of 44.8 million, which is an increase of about 6.3%, or $212 per year for the average residential property. The average residential property in Orangeville was tax bill was about $5,476 in 2024. Approximately 62% of that total tax bill is for services that relate to those services that are in the responsibility of the town, including policing services. The other two portions of the property tax bill are the education portion and the county portion. And so to understand the impact of the town's budget on the total property tax bill, we need to multiply the town impact by 62%. In 2025, adjusted for the December 9th amendments, this equates to approximately 3.87% on the total tax bill. Again, we note that the County of Dufferin will be tabling its budget later this week, and their staff have proposed a budget including service expansions that has a tax impact of approximately 5.6% on the county portion of the bill. The county portion of the bill is approximately 28% of the total, and if approved, that would add another 1.55%. We do note that there are no changes to the education tax rates in 25, so there will be no increase for education rates next year. And so the total tax increase, if the county were to approve its budget as tabled, is estimated to be approximately 5.4%. And with that, I believe I'm turning it over to my colleague, General Manager Tim Koselek, to deliver some highlights from his budget.
Mr. Koslak, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Part of our budget presentation for infrastructure services, we were focusing on the asset renewal and the state of good repair of our equipment. One of the key items we have in this year's budget that's proposed is one full-time person, a stormwater management project manager. The town has 32 stormwater ponds, many of them 30, 40 years old, and we haven't had a capital program to clean the ponds. So as a result, we have 30 ponds that haven't been maintained over the years. We'd like to implement a program to start a cleaning of the ponds. We put money in the proposed budget too for some of the detailed design with it. But we need a person on staff to be able to drive the program, coordinate the approvals with the groups, prepare the tenders, and get the project going, and also manage the project during construction. We also have a lot of other work this person would be involved with. We're doing the work on Mill Creek right now. We're trying to keep that going, but that's been a slow process because we don't have somebody to physically drive the project. And with that, I guess it also goes into our storm sewer system. This person would monitor our storm sewer system. We're cleaning and cameraing all our storm sewers over the next 2 years. This person would also be reviewing the videos from that and developing a program to replace any of the storm sewers that are in poor condition. So from an asset management and a state of good repair, it's a vital position to be able to have as part of it. Another position we have for our public works is part of our contracted services, and that's the group. We have one person right now, a project technologist. They deliver our crack sealing program, our sidewalk replacement program, our curb repairs, and this is a proposed summer student that would help that person. So that would help with the inspections, it would help with the customer service when we're doing work in an area, and it just gives us more of a presence out there and work's being done. In my mind, students are a relatively cheap alternative that we can have, and it really helps deliver the program. We help educate students, but above all, we get a better product at the end of the day, and we keep a little bit more of an eye on the contractor doing the work. So those are two of the items I wanted to focus. A lot of our budget is operating based. There will be increases for fuel, there's increases for the cost of chlorine or salt, but fundamentally, those are our two new asks as part of our budget program. Maybe I'll turn it over to my neighbor, Heather Savage.
Ms. Savage?
Thank you, Mr. Koselek. So as I mentioned last night, the proposed 2025 community service budget was designed to maintain service levels, not many enhancements. We're getting caught up. Staff determined what the priorities are and which services required investments. The same rings true for operations. Not only did we experience infrastructure challenges in 2024, there were also increased pressure on the Parks and Facilities team to meet and exceed service standards. The team dedicated time to get to the root of the issue. We questioned how can we increase capacity and what resources are needed to be able to meet and exceed those standards. Among many opportunities to improve our processes, which we have implemented some now, the staffing structure was identified which could improve recruitment and retention. To support this, there are 2 facility operation contracts proposed to be converted to full-time. These conversions would add a leadership role to oversee Tony Rose Memorial Sport Facility and corporate facilities, which there are multiple. For example, Town Hall, Water Pollution Control Plant, Jean Hamlin YMCA Daycare, OSPCA, I could go on. Recreation events rental program is also experiencing similar pressures. The demand for facility space has steadily increased, which is positive. It's positive for business, particularly in the non-prime hours. To support this work, there are 2 contract conversions to full-time. Currently, there are 2 staff members putting in full-time hours but remain as part-time status. An intense review of our fees took place this year. Fire service agreements increased, library fees increased, and recreation fees were increased up to 20%. The non-resident fee for programming went from 20% to 25%. All of this helps to offset these staffing costs, but the more popular the service, the more staffing hours are required. We're just trying to keep up. And as CAO Smith said, staff are at the heart of our service. On to corporate services, GM Minikilo.
Ms. Minikila, the floor is yours.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. We're going to take a look at the corporate services component of the operating budget. And like the entire organization, we're investing in our people as a key driver. So drivers that I wanted to highlight tonight really revolve around the IT team. The town's IT division, as you know, has been impacted by significant staff turnover over the past couple years. This has altered the makeup of the existing capabilities of the team and has highlighted that we're operating at suboptimal capacity. We are setting a new course with the IT team that requires some restructuring, conversion of positions, and addressing of immediate threats. Generally, the goal is to move from a firefighting or reactive approach to issues to becoming proactive and setting up IT as a strategic partner for the organization. As a result, we have 2 conversions and 1 FTE being proposed. I'll talk about the conversions first. Number 1 is that our software development engineer evolves into a program manager and application architecture and planning. The second is that our junior help desk tech evolve into a help desk technician. I did want to give you a bit of background in this so that you can understand why we're asking for that. This position originally started out at 3 students being paid out at a student rate. The student rate was kept and it became a junior help desk position. The compensation for this position needs to be updated and it needs to match the actual duties we're asking the individual to do. So this conversion reflects that evolution. I also want to note generally, conversions can be a very effective tool where appropriate because it avoids simply layering on more and more layers of staff. So conversions are actually quite strategic in nature. Permanent FTE, as you know, on the IT team, we have 1 full-time complement being proposed, and that's the program manager of infrastructure, operations, and security. Now, I don't want to, set an alarm bell, but in today's digital age, the landscape of cyber threats is constantly evolving, it's becoming more sophisticated and pervasive. It's essential for all of us to do our part and be informed about what's going on in that space. And cybersecurity is a foremost concern for municipalities and businesses alike. The town's network and security staff need the capacity and capability to proactively manage this. In the Blackline report, it recommended, and we concur, that this particular skill set should be onboarded as a full-time complement and to ensure sufficient diligence is paid to this critical IT service and that the skill set be in-house. So investing in cybersecurity really the position is not just about protecting data, it's also about ensuring the safety, reliability, and trustworthiness of the municipal services that we provide. So I will leave it at that for corporate services positions. Thank you.
Ms. Braun, or is it CAO Smith who's taking this part? CAO Smith?
Yes, thank you. I've just got a brief remarks on this. We're going to pass the baton around a little bit on this. So in the first 2 areas, council compensation is increased due primarily to benefit increases, which is impacting all of our staff. Benefits are increasing in cost each year. And there's a reduction in the budget through our committees of council. Staff consulted with the committees and they were very collaborative in reallocating or reducing the amount of budget that they were requesting each year based on their 2025 work plans and based on history of spending. So we were appreciative of that. The next item is administration, and actually General Manager Minicello is going to speak about that because it's a position that would be in her department.
Thank you, CAO Smith. Through you, Madam Mayor. The role of the advisor of special projects is really a critical one to our organization. As you know, our strategic initiatives team, currently comprised of essentially 3 people, is winding down, and our recommendation is that we create 1 full-time complement to continue advancing the critical Blackline projects, the implementation of project management practices here at the town, not just for corporate services, but the entire organization, and create a center of excellence around project management. The other key role of this work will be to assist with government relations, preparation for delegations, conferences, things like AMO, where you're doing so much of the heavy lifting. We want to be a part of helping elevate that and helping you do what you do very well. And then also just advancing intergovernment relations, which we think can yield better results in terms of grants and collaboration, that sort of thing. The other thing that is we're hopeful this position will achieve is we'd like to really manage a corporate-wide effort to get a better understanding of our financial and working relationships with the surrounding local municipalities and Dufferin County, to advance analysis into how Orangeville stays whole as others rely on us and use our services. And, you know, many of you have mentioned this or echoed sentiments of sort of some inequity that's happening. We would like to conduct a deep dive into what is working, what is not, and what is needed to course correct there. One of the many goals of this position will be to ensure that there's a sustained effort towards fairness for Orangeville and advancing continuous effort towards this goal. In our opinion, this position really does have the ability to be a game changer for the organization. Thank you.
Ms. Braun.
Yeah, I'm closing this part out. So I wanted to note that on the administration section on the slide, we did strike out a comment there. That's largely because we did present the budget numbers as reallocated. We had a number of reallocations in our budget, and to compare apples to apples, we're just showing what the 2024 number is comparatively to the 2025 number after the reallocations. So in terms of the corporate allocations budget, which is where we've currently been putting things that don't seem to fit in other areas, this includes revenue increases for budgeted investment income, penalties, and interest. We need to adjust our budget estimates for POA revenue and supplementary taxes to reflect some declining trends, unfortunately. And capital funding is reflected. Capital funding reflecting increased capital levy contributions and debt financing costs are offset by other decreases in reserve contributions. For policing services, we again note that costs have increased by 40%, 16% for the add back of the one-time savings from 2024, and 24% for the increased cost of services anticipated for 2025, including that new collective agreement that exceeded previous estimates. With the announcement of the temporary relief, Council has several alternatives, obviously, to consider, and we will be discussing those at the end of the presentation. Turning our minds to the Orangeville Railway Development Corporation, you'll recall that it was a $31.2 million in land sale, but net of proceeds, net of appraisal and legal costs and the like, real estate fees and whatnot, the proceeds were around $30 million. The proceeds have been invested in 5 high-interest GICs, and you'll recall the arrangement with the ORDC was that the town provided effectively a shareholder loan to the corporation to cover ongoing operating costs for things like property taxes and things like that. So then as part of the arrangement, the ORDC board passed a resolution that the interest earned on these GICs is to be transferred back to the town as a part of that loan repayment. So at the end of 2023, the loan balance was $7.3 million. With 2024 interest of about $1.5 million, this will bring the balance down to $5.8 million by the end of this year. Just moving on to, and this clicker is not working. There we go. So this slide is from last week, and we've added some additional context at the bottom of that provides the percentage of the total town tax levy that is related to policing services. So you can see back in 2020, before the town transitioned to OPP delivered service, policing costs were approximately 23% of the total tax levy. Through the transition years, 2021 to 2023, the percentage stayed constant at 21%. And then in 2024, when the town transitioned to their full business billing model, policing costs dropped to approximately 10% of the total town levy. For 2025, even with the 40% increase in cost, it's driving the percentage on the total levy up to about 13%, which is still below the percentage of costs in comparison to 2020. So as we alluded to and included in the staff report were the 3 options with what to do with the one-time relief for OPP costs. They're outlined on the slide here. I won't go through them again in any detail, but it's essentially, it's a little over $1 million, and it has a property tax impact of about 2.5% in 2025. So it's important to realize that this relief is temporary. I keep saying that. It's very important to understand that. And to the extent that it's taken into the 2025 budget to reduce the levy, it will need to be added back in 26, and that'll put even more pressure on the 26 budget. The approach that staff recommend is redirecting the savings on a one-time basis as a contribution to a capital reserve to provide that much needed funding to either accelerate capital works or reduce our debt requirements in future years. This approach obviously will preserve that budget capacity that we've now got currently built in there, so that when OPP costs jump back up to their level in 2026, we don't have to add more back to the budget. And this slide is just there for reference. It's got a lot of numbers on there. I will note that the footnote was a bit misleading when we presented this last week. So these figures are all just town impact on the town portion of the bill. It's not for the total tax bill. There was some confusion about that last week. And then the remaining 3 slides here at the end of the published deck include the resolutions for the 3 options that were presented in the staff report. In the slide on the screen, however, we've removed the actual figures because there may be some changes further tonight that we can then plug in the numbers at council's request. And with that, Madam Mayor, I'm turning it back over to you for the discussion portion.
Thank you very much, Ms. Braun, and thank you to all of our general managers and town staff for their presentations today. Very informative. We're going to follow the same process that we did last night, Council, starting with infrastructure services, then community services, into corporate services. Then we will look at admin, council, and committees, and then we'll look at corporate allocation. So we'll do it in that order. So let's start with questions about infrastructure services. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, I appreciate tremendously all the work that has gone into this budget preparation and day number 2 as we get into operations. This is directed to General Manager Koselleck. Again, I thank you for the clarification on the FTE request. As has been highlighted, the importance of storm water management. You've identified very clearly the number of storm water management ponds that we have in our community, and they need, of course, maintenance. They need to have a directive. They need to have a plan in place because we are going to be dealing, as has been echoed even here at times in the council chambers, concerns about climate change. And so I'm in full support of this. I do have a question that is not off base, but since we're talking about operations, this is page 144 of the budget document, and this would be the transportation compensation. Can you provide some clarification on this, just for my own sake and maybe members of council? It has escalated from one amount to another. Does that mean it's been moved? And I know that we've gone through service level changes and it's identified in the document, but I just needed to have clarification in this public forum today that it's going from a certain amount to a certain amount. And that certain amount is actually quite significant.
Mr. Koselleck?
Through your worship, just for clarification, was it a particular item in the transport?
Yeah, this was page 144, and this is the transportation compensation. So on the budget document, and again, I will pull it up on my, so this is page 144 of the general budget document.
No.
Under operating.
Yeah. Through your worship, that was a reallocation of staff costs. I believe that were originally charged to other accounts, including Public Works. So it was a reduction from the Public Works account and charged to this account to balance off the staff cost.
Great, that's what I needed as a clarification, because again, so we're seeing one number and now the increased number, that does provide the assurances that I'm looking for. At this time, Your Worship, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Andrews. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. Just if I could, through you, Ms. Braun, just a couple of questions to level set before we go. At the very bottom of the report that you gave, it talks about what 2026 will look like, and it just talks about a potential tax increase of over 7%. And I was curious if you could talk through that and what the drivers are, because really I don't know how we can make a decision on tonight over such amount of money if we don't talk about that. And if I may, just one other question while I have you too. More of a comment on the budget, if I could. First of all, great budget, very easy to understand, with one caveat, and that is I find it very difficult when we continue to make changes to the different subcategories within the channels, and we're constantly taking things from corporate services or moving it to a different bucket, and then we lose the history on it. So it's hard to compare where we are and where we aren't, and you're not the first treasurer that we've dealt with, and it seems to be an ongoing thing, so it's certainly not with yourself. But I wish we wouldn't do that so much, just because it's hard as an amateur finance person to sort my way through it when the buckets don't, they're not true. So it would just be an observation and something I wish we could talk about for future years.
Ms. Braun?
So maybe I'll address your second comment first. I do acknowledge that we here at the town of Orangeville, we seem to show the reallocations as an increase or a decrease and not show a restated budget. I believe that if we were to move to that kind of an approach, at least the year-over-year increase would be comparable. So that's something we can take back and take a look at for next year. In answer to your question about the 7.9%, that does take into account all the capital funding pressures as well. So if we're going to be issuing debt, if we think we're going to issue debt this year, which we know a portion of that is the fire hall, which we're not going to do, but it is in the capital budget. So we've taken all those calculations into account. We've applied inflation on various line items in accordance, to reflect the trends for that. We're capturing any debt servicing costs, any contractual increases that we need to. So if we have a 3-year multi-year contract and those increases are built into CPI, we have to capture those up, and they're usually a year or two behind as we see the CPI data come into play in the contracts. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question. We can as staff take a little bit more of a deeper dive, bring back some additional information on the 7.9, but it's generally like funding for capital, transfers to reserves, obviously some COLA and some CPI increases for next year.
Deputy Mayor, yep.
So if we did move, as per one of the options, the 500,000, then we're essentially another point and a bit. So we were sitting at 9.
Yeah.
We're thereabouts, for argument's sake.
Right.
My last question to you is, frequently when I've done budgets, and not to the skill level that you've got, just my amateur hour at my employer, I'll awfulize, and I call it, hey, this is worst case scenario. Did you awfulize the 7.9, or is that?
No, I'm not sure that we did. I think the 7.9 might be a bit of a sticker shock, because I think what I noted when I first started here is that in some cases, they were using the capital funding number as a plug to get to a desired tax rate increase to show. And that's not the appropriate way to show your budget. We should be taking into account like the consolidated budget year over year, what it costs for capital and operating costs, and showing that. And then you can make more informed decisions. Maybe you need to defer more capital projects that are nice to haves in order to bring that tax rate increase down a little bit. Does that help?
Deputy Mayor, you good? Okay.
Go ahead. Not really.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything else you can do for us, but I feel like we're operating in the dark a little bit, because you wouldn't want to just make a decision for tonight and next year. I don't think that's responsible. We want to make a decision that's best for Orangeville long term. And it leaves me with trepidation thinking about what that's going to look like. I'm not sure we quite grasp it, but I'm not putting you on the hot seat because I don't know what else you would tell me. It feels like, we're going to have to make a leap of faith here tonight.
Well, and I will remind council that as it currently stands, we don't have a multi-year budget approved. We still have annual budget deliberations. So you'll get an opportunity to look at 2026 before 26 is approved and go into that in a lot more detail.
CEO Smith, did you want to add something as well?
I was just going to add that through Ms. Braun's leadership in the finance team, council has heard that we are developing a long-range financial integrated strategy that takes many pieces of this that will better inform decisions going forward. And some of those things have sticker shock, will have sticker shock, but it allows you to make informed choices. And, you know, part of this is why we brought the fire hall to your attention, because we knew that if we went ahead in that project, it would be unaffordable. So our responsibility is to keep you informed, to give you information to make the best choices you can, and yours in part is to make service level changes. So when we decide that something is too expensive, as the treasurer said, we don't do it. You know, we start to only build what we can maintain and responsibly do that over time. That number, you're not committing to that number tonight, you know, just to be clear, as it's a projection out, things change. Next year, council could set a budget target. Say, hey, we want you to develop a target at this level, and what would it take to do that? And we would responsibly come back and meet that target.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Your Worship. On page 144 under transportation, outside services went from 803,000 to 1.2 million. Just wondering what's all involved in this item and why it went up 60%.
Mr. Koslak?
Yep, through your worship. Outside services, a lot of it is the contractor for the bus service. So that would include repairs to the bus, driving the buses, the purchase of fuel. A lot of it, the costs are because we have an older fleet. Our buses are getting repaired quite frequently and is driving up the cost significantly. Also, the price of fuel has gone up a fair bit. In our previous contract, they had a lower cost for the fuel, and it's gone up to meet the current pricing for fuel.
Councillor Stevens, follow up?
Yes, please. So 60%? That's...
Yep, through your worship.
Koslak, yep.
16%, roughly
60
or 60%. A lot of it is the repairs to the vehicles. They've needed a lot of repairs. I can get a more detailed outline of it, but a lot of the additional costs are the repairs to the vehicles.
Okay.
Anything
I have
additional?
more, but I...
Go ahead, Councillor
Okay.
Stevens, go with another one.
Same page, 144. $89,000 new program fee. Can you explain that? Same area, page 144. It's under programs. 89,000. It's just a new item.
Mr. Koslak?
Yeah, through your worship. I believe that was a transfer over from the Public Works program, so it's moving our program over, but I don't know if Finance or Tony has more details on it. To check on.
I think Ms.
I can help
Medeiros
you out
is
a little bit. It says new program, so I'm not sure what that means.
Oh, yeah, I'll ask Mr. DeLeese to comment a little bit on it.
Mr. DeLeese?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I apologize. This one catches me a little bit by surprise, but I do believe that was a carryover where we moved from other departments. But I'm going to defer to our friends in finance on that. I apologize.
Can I just jump in for a minute, please? I'm sorry.
CEO Smith?
I just want to coach staff, all staff and members of council. When it's a very detailed question, we may take a minute or two or 3 or 4 or 5 to get you the right answer. So don't feel pressured, anybody, you're not on the clock. Okay, so take the time that we need to give the right answer.
Ms. Medeiros has her mic on, so I think she is ready with an answer.
Yes, through your worship. So we made a lot of transfers from Public Works to Transportation Development. This particular item was the trees. So we moved all the tree related costs over to transportation. So it's not a new item, it's just a reallocation.
Okay. Councillor Stevens?
Sorry, I'm just a little dumbfounded right now. So trees get put under programming under transportation?
Ms.
And I'm
Medeiros?
not trying to, sorry I put you on the spot, but this one just caught me as I was coming in tonight. So it's, almost 90,000 and
Ms. Medeiros?
This one relates to the Emerald Ash Borer program. It's a specific tree program.
I think the question is, why is it under the transportation budget and not in a different area of the budget?
So Tony's team is the transportation development team, and under his program area is trees.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Koslek?
Through your worship, one of the things I wanted to clarify, we did change the budget. Previously, Public Works had everything. So all the capital program was under Public Works, all of Tony's group, Transportation Develop, and Public Works were all under one budget. It made it a little bit confusing whose area it was and who was spending the money on which programs. So this year, finance had separated out. So the Transportation and Development group you're looking at is Tony's Transportation and Development budget. We have a separate budget for Capital Works, separate budget for Public Works. So it just gives a little bit more clarity. For the tree program, it is Tony's group that delivers that. So that's why the budget's under his group, to be able to manage it and monitor it. And the other one, when I was talking about the outside services, the outside service would include some of the things we probably have, like our arborist and different items too. We can get a more detailed breakdown, but it would include other items that are as part of Tony's group.
Councillor Sherwood.
Through your worship to Mr. Luce, have we ever put any thought into having our own mechanics or hiring a mechanic to do bus repairs ourselves? I would assume right now our bus repairs are being looked after by First Student. They're charging us back, maybe with some kind of inflationary service increase. Has there ever been any thought about us, not our own mechanic, but hiring our own mechanic? Would that make the cost a little less, come down as far as paying for a student?
Mr. Jalise, do you want that one?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Sherwood. It has been looked at as part of previous contracts. My understanding is, and this did happen before my time, that there was a value analysis done, and it was determined that as part of the contract that came into being in 2021 through First Student, that it was more cost effective to have that contractor provide the service.
Thank you, Mr. Jalise. Was there additional questions under infrastructure services? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have been banging the table for years about sidewalks and trees. And so I just want to make sure I understand how this is going to go. So we have hired an additional person in Public Works who's going to look after sidewalks and trees. Because now, if I may, just quickly, I'll tell you what I think I understand. So we have Matt, Boomy, and yourself, Tony. And now we're going to have a third individual in there. That's where that role is going to go. And then we'll have customer service developed for trees, and we'll have customer service for sidewalks. And why I ask the question is, I've been a thorn in your side, and I apologize that I have been, but there's so many issues with sidewalks, and there's so many issues with trees that we get lost sometimes. And so I'm just hoping that, is this the solve? And do I have that right? We've got the extra body to work with Matt and Boomy.
Mr. Koslek, I think, has taken that one.
Through your worship, I don't know if you're talking about the summer student we're looking at adding to our program.
Is that what the role is? I'm sorry.
That's a summer student we're looking at adding. So in our Public Works department, I always call the person, they're a Public Works technologist. Her name's Jaden. She does all our sidewalks, crack sealing, and a lot of the program. So we only have the one person. So if she's ever off or there's multiple crews working in town, sometimes we don't get supervision. If we have a student, they can go out there and make sure things are okay, or if residents are concerned. So it's a fairly low cost to add a student. It's about a $10,000 item, and it adds a lot of protection for our program and just better for the residents, better quality product. So Tony's group isn't changing as part of the budget. It's the one student we're adding for the Public Works to assist with the program.
Thank you for the clarification. Do we think then that will solve kind of the backlog and communication? Is that like, that's the idea, right? Is those two pieces?
Mr. Koslek?
Yep, through your worship, the person delivering the program has developed a good program, looking at developing a 5-year program. If you go on some of the streets right now, you can see it marked out with black paint for next year. So she's doing all the quantities, estimates. So once the budget's approved, we'll get the tender out. Last year, we did about $350,000 worth of sidewalk repairs, which is probably what was done in the previous 5 years. So we have a pretty robust program that we're delivering. And the $350,000 program, it's a lot for one person to do. So it's nice having that student to help with the program.
Councillor Stevens and then Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to go back to this $89,000 tree initiative, I think it was, but can we defer it for a year? Are these the trees that you're putting on the boulevards right now? Is that?
Mr. Jalise?
And thank you, CEO Smith, for giving me that moment. I had a chance to review it and look at it, and it was the programs that that threw me off guard a little bit. That was actually the EAB program that our finance team reminded me of, and certainly that was once referred to as the EAB program. So that program is winding down, and rather than continue to call it the EAB program, we just called it programs. So that will deal with trees and maintenance and certainly any other diseases that are on trees. And I hate to use that term, but for lack of a better term, I think it's better understood that way. So I apologize for my earlier missing of that. Thank you for that, Councillor Stevens.
CEO Smith?
EAB, I think you're referring to Emerald Ash Borer. Yeah.
That's correct, CEO Smith.
Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, through you, Worship. And I'm, again, sorry I put you on the spot. I didn't mean to do that at all. It was just an item that I just had no idea what it was. So if I don't know, I need to ask.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor McIntosh?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. This is a question, just a comment. Deputy Mayor Taylor had mentioned before, when you guys move stuff around, it's very hard for us to keep track of it. So I agree with the Emerald Ash Borer, and it's in the budget every year, but we have no record of how much was in last year. We don't know if it's an increase, a decrease. So it's just kind of confusing for us when things have moved around like that. Thank you.
No, I think that's good commentary that Ms. Braun has taken away. That will help us for next year and future years. Councillor Sherwood?
Yes, Your Worship. Again, I'm gonna echo the same thing. I look at page 62 and I look at the Public Works overall budget request, and I see that it's a negative 17.3% decrease. And again, it's hard to comprehend that. I know that the Public Works Department is not decreasing by that percentage. It's been shifted somewhere else. Makes it very difficult as we sit here to approve things when we don't know, is it up and down, what's it for? So again, it's just a comment that I find it a little frustrating that there's all these shifts within departments. I've seen this is my 6th budget, and this is the 6th year we've seen this do this. There's never been a break in these constant shifts. I thought at some point would the shifting stop.
Mr. Koselleck?
Through Your Worship, just wanted to clarify, last year in the budget, we had $87,000 for the program, but a lot of it's used also when we have storms. Public Works uses the funds when they need to clean up, when debris happens, trees fall. So it's not just tree planting and Emerald Ash Borer, it's also used for cleanup for debris, branches that fall on the road, anything they need to do as part of the Public Works program. So it's a maintenance in addition to that.
Thank you, Mr. Koselleck. Any additional questions about the infrastructure? Oh, CAO Smith.
Yeah, I'll just comment. I feel council's frustration. I appreciate it. I understand that. I've been here 18 months. We're with our 3rd treasurer, and there is change. We have an incredibly brilliant and smart treasurer and treasury team. I can assure you that next year, as we evolve over time, we will get better and better. And this is the part that I was speaking about earlier, about attracting good, smart staff and retaining good, smart staff. And that's what our goal in Orangeville is to do. So I acknowledge your frustration.
Thank you, CAO Smith. Additional questions about the infrastructure services portion? Deputy Mayor.
At the risk of upsetting people in the room whom I respect, yourself, Your Worship, I cannot go through the budget and not mention the CDC. And I apologize to you too, CAO Smith. I'm not trying to run things down here. The budget increase is 26% for an organization that offers us zippity-doo. I would really love to send this back and say, we're not going to give you an increase, which I know based on provincial law and whatnot, we're not going to get away with that. But I would just love to make a statement. And I would just put it out there for the rest of council to consider that they're asking for 26% increase and we get nothing. So anyway, we'll leave it at that. All respect to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think it's interesting. There are some municipalities, and it may be an approach we want to take in the future, who remove items such as CVC, OPP, different things that we don't have direct control over, and handle those items after our budget approval, just so that they can present their portion. I know there are some municipalities that are shifting to that thought process. And I think that's something we can take away for future years for things like the CVC and OPP coming back and just presenting their budgets to us. Additional questions about infrastructure services portion? Councillor McIntosh.
Just real quick, if the deputy mayor was to make that motion, I would second it.
We have some provincial requirements when it comes to CVC that I think we need to be cautious of at that point. But I think the point is taken by staff and for future. Additional infrastructure services questions? Okay, we will move over to community services. Was there questions about the community services portion of the budget? Deputy Mayor?
Just to not leave the issue, could we have the town send a letter? And my motion would be is we let them know that we're not happy with the increase.
CAO Smith?
I don't think we should leave this.
Yeah, definitely we could send a letter. I think it's an overstatement to say we get nothing from the CVC. Quite frankly, they are working very, very, very collaboratively when we're looking at options on some of our projects. We have frustrations with them. I'm sure they have frustrations with us. I think our path to success is increasing the dialogue, having them come more regularly, expressing concerns, getting residents that have concerns directly to CVC. We shouldn't be wearing the brunt of that. We can't not pay the bill, quite frankly, but there are tools. I've looked into it based on our discussion. There's elements of their budget that we may be able to have more scrutiny under in future. We have a representative on the board, that council members can share that perspective with. Certainly a letter is not inappropriate. I think that's a better approach than other approaches.
Deputy Mayor? Oh. Councillor Stevens and Councillor Sherwood?
Thank you, Your Worship. So as the member who sat there for the last 2 years, I can much assure you that most of this stuff does not come to the board level. It's staff. So, and I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Sherwood? Deputy Mayor?
In the letter, I would suggest that it would, you're the operator, you'll decide how you'll write this letter, but I would love it where we talk about the increase. And then I also think that they should be more transparent about their ability to work with us. And that would be having nighttime meetings and rotating the meeting location. That meeting is an hour down the road in the middle of the business day.
Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to work with CAO Smith, and him and I together can draft a letter that we will send out for council approval following this. And I don't think we need a motion to do that. That direction is fine. Councillor McIntosh?
Should that letter also go to our provincial politicians?
I'll leave that and we'll put it together and we'll bring it back to council. Thank you. Councillor Sherwood, community services question?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. I just want to start off by complimenting our Economic and Development Department. They have come in with a 1.3% budget increase. So I want to thank you, Katrina, and your team. And maybe the rest of the departments can kind of look to you to see how to do that.
Okay, any other questions about community services budget lines? No, we're good. Deputy Mayor.
So just so we're on the same page, this is all under Ms. Savage. That's where we are. Okay, perfect. Sorry, I'm just getting caught up here. Sorry, I'm going to be for Antonetta. It's if you're watching online, it's hard to keep the ball rolling here when you're in real time. I would like to say I appreciate your commentary and thank you for recognizing Ms. Savage. I love your line about fairness for Orangeville, and I think that should be a theme. And I don't think we should be afraid of spouting that, even if that causes dissension with our relationships. It's time. It's time to ruffle feathers. And I just think that's something that we should adopt. It's called fairness for Orangeville. And I appreciate you doing that. And then I'll wait for my next friend.
Community services, are we good? Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, through your worship to Ms. Savage. I can't find anything specific, but maybe you could just give me a broad explanation as to a 13% increase to your parks budget. At your overall 13%.
Ms. Savage? Oh, are we turning it to Mr. Cosgrove?
You, Mayor Post, to Councillor Sherwood, I believe that percentage you're talking about is a one-time repair that we need to complete on the Springbrook Trail, and it's in there for 25,000, which would increase our overall budget.
Councillor Sherwood?
Yeah, Mr. Cosgrove, it's just the summary of the whole operating budget itself. And there's some that are percentages that are up and down. I see insurance is up. I was just hoping you could give just a general explanation of 13%. But you know what? I think that's trying to pin you on something that's impossible to answer. So I was just talking out loud.
Thank you, Mr. Cosgrove. Okay, community services, are we good there? So corporate services is where we'll turn to next. And I know Deputy Mayor had a question, and then Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. First off, I love the way you framed this. I'm so excited about what you're doing, and for the public to realize, to go to AMO, which is where we would lobby to the government for help with things that can happen in our town, and to have that help from the town framing it and making sure we've got a top-notch presentation, that's money well spent, as is trying to spend money on getting grants. That's money well spent. I think that's amazing work. So I just wanted to call that out, and I think that the whole thing is well spent. Like, it's going to be a great ROI. The other piece that I wanted to call out is an old wound, and maybe it's for the two individuals that are on the hydro board and yourself. The dividend thing is an annoyance to me. It's $1 million corporation. And again, I just want to relate it to that. I love the Royal Bank. I've owned Royal Bank stock for ages. The Royal Bank's dividend goes up each year. And that's why I like it so much, is because each year I hold that stock, I get more of a dividend. The hydro board, if it were a stock, it would be sinking. And why it would be sinking is because I'm annoyed that the dividend goes zing, 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 and doesn't necessarily appreciate over time, yet the net worth of the corporation continues to go up. I think what I would love to see is them to be consistent and give us consistency, because investors like consistency, and it should be raising over time. Like, it should be a dividend aristocrat, not a dividend undependable, which is what it is. And, the president does great work, so he should not take this as offense if he hears this, but we need to put pressure on them to give us more income on a regular basis that is consistent. And it doesn't need to expand by 10%. Like, it could expand by, 1% or 2% each year, but it should be expanding. We're all inflating, and so are they. They're doing very well, but they need to be more consistent in what they're doing for us. And that's my observation.
I can address some of that a little bit briefly anyways. There's a recent strategic plan that has been adopted by the Hydro Board that does look at alternate income paths, because that will help us to drive additional dividends as well. So it is something that is being looked at by Hydro as an organization and by the board. So stay tuned for that.
If I may, just really quickly.
Yep.
One of the biggest issues that we have as a town is the very fact that people are sitting in the gallery or watching on home are, for the most part, our revenue source. And CAO Smith, you've been wonderful trying to describe, hey, we need to get more revenue sources. This is one of them, guys. Like we need this to happen. The discussion earlier today about having out-of-towners pay for parking, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But these are the things that we should be looking into. We got to take the onus off of the taxpayer and have more, and the Hydro Board needs to contribute to that in a more fulfilling, sustainable way.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Andrews and then Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question is to General Manager Michello. The two service level changes, again, number one, as Deputy Mayor Taylor spoke about it, the ROI on that I think is absolutely imperative, and I think it's a great ask, and it's one that I'm firmly in support of. The importance of connecting from a government relations perspective, using the term lobbying, as it's not frequently used in our nomenclature here in Canada, but it's one that's used quite evidently in other countries. We need to have that individual who can, in fact, represent the municipality front and center in that capacity. And I do really, really like the way you described it. As for the second FTE, I'm also in support of that. The risk to the municipality is significant. We've seen that in other municipalities. And again, that is just one component of that individual's responsibility is the cybersecurity, but the opportunity to integrate and connect with our other departments is also going to be imperative. So as much as some in our community may end up saying we're adding additional staff, what you have done is you've identified very clearly how we have 3 positions that are in fact are being phased, and you are replacing it with an individual that is in fact going to cost less, but it is also going to end up paying huge dividends for us. So again, firmly in support of the 2 positions that you've identified.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mine's more of a comment observation in regards to the full-time the cybersecurity that you speak of. I know I sit on the Hydro Board with Mayor Post, and they use an outside company. So I'm wondering if we can convince them to go with the town and use our person. Would that be something that would be possible?
Ms. Minikila?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Post, to Councillor McIntosh. Just so I'm clear, you're suggesting that we use their resource or they use our resource?
They use ours.
I would say that in the first little while, this individual is going to have their hands quite full, and they're doing a lot more than cyber security. They are looking at the full integration of our systems enterprise-wide. However, down the road, if there are opportunities, we are in so many discussions with other municipalities in terms of what they're doing. Even when we look at procurement for services and things of that nature, we're constantly seeing if we can align forces with anybody, achieve any type of savings for Orangeville, look at the county level, partnerships, all of those things. So that's built into the way we do business, and this would be no different. We'll apply that thinking as we go down the road with this position if approved tonight.
Councillor McIntosh, follow up?
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Your Worship. My first one is tax write-offs. I know there's a line, it says about 300,000. Can you explain that?
Ms. Braun?
Yeah, so tax write-offs, it's part of the assessment process. So, when there's new properties coming onto the roll, those increase the assessment base. Similarly, when there's demolitions or kind of impairments on properties and then impact goes out to reassess those, in some cases, the amount of taxes that are assessed goes down, and we essentially need to give a refund. So we have to write down, it's a cost in our levy. We also have supplementary taxes, which are the increase of the in-year assessments coming onto the roll. Does that help?
It does. I just want to make sure everybody's paying their bills.
They are.
And if I can.
Go ahead, Councillor Stevens.
IT professional fees went up 192%. Went from 83,000 to 243. Yeah.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll defer to our expert, our manager of IT, Mr. Narvali, to speak to it.
Mr. Narvali, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Post. So there was, we did a reshuffling of our budget to make it more aligned with the services. So we took a lot of the items out of corporate administration and reallocated them. So there's a shifting of budgets. The only thing that we've really added was one budget line of 60,000 for professional services in the security and data protection, and that was really around SIM operation. So it's a cybersecurity service. Sorry, is it my scratchy voice? Sorry. We did some reshuffling of the budget, which moved some dollars around. Is there a particular line item that?
No, it just, oh, sorry, if I may, Your Worship. It was just the increase of 192% that on page 253, that it just kind of like threw me for a loop, so to speak, when something that drastic goes up.
Yeah, on page 253, where you see the professional fees, it's under that item there.
Breakdown here just to make sure I identify the correct line. We have we moved $17,000 from administrative services into security and data protection for professional services. We moved $300. We added $60,000 we added $15,000 to GIS services for services. I don't see that. Yeah, do you mind if I go back and just check the numbers to make sure that I have the right data for you?
Yes, no problem.
I will take that away. I will go hunting.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
While you're looking for that, is there any additional questions on corporate services, Deputy Mayor?
Two questions, if I could. One is, I know we still do the facade grant, but I don't see the line item here. At least I think we still do the facade grant. I thought it was a great program. Where do I see that now moving forward? Facade grant.
Yeah, CIP.
Through you, Madam
Oh,
Mayor,
it's there.
I do think that there is some confusion. Corporate services and corporate allocations, the facade grant program, finance can speak to it perhaps. So I'll defer it to them.
Okay.
They're not the budget asks for the corporate services team.
My apologies.
That's okay.
My second question is going to be to you again then, if I could, and it's about fines, which maybe goes back to you, Antonetta, but do we think, maybe I'll back up. I got a complaint from a resident just recently about a $25 parking ticket. The individual had a just case in my mind, but what struck me for this discussion is it was a $25 parking ticket. The reality is it's not deferring behavior, and should we be re-looking at these things again? Like I think they should change behavior and pad our fines bucket back to other ways to get revenue. Is that something we would discuss?
I'll speak maybe on a more general level on that through you, Madam Mayor. So in our budget, we are moving towards AMPS. Council is well aware of that. There's been reporting on that. So there will be budget for a part-time screening officer. And then there's additional budget which is required for a hearing officer. The hearing officer must be a third party. So that's why we have that piece. We are projecting revenue from AMPS, but it is conservative for the first year because we don't know how much we're going to get, and it's our best guess. And we never want to overestimate and then be in a difficult financial position. So that will be done through the AMPS program. And like I said, I think across the board, the direction from, leadership is look at ways to generate more revenue fairly. Of course, we're not looking to, do anything that's not within legislation, things of that nature, to increase revenue sources. But AMPS will take care of that. I don't know if Madam Clerk wants to add anything further.
Ms. Martel?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, so we will be looking at when we implement the AMPS program, the amount the fines are coming through. Through POA, we get a very small amount of the fines associated. Through AMPS, we will get the majority, if not all, of the money outside of the hearing officer cost. So we will be looking at the cost of the fines when we start to implement AMPS early in the first quarter of 2025.
Additionally, I think of note is there's some advocacy being done by one of our neighboring municipalities in Mono. Mayor Creelman is doing some work on POA fines and unpaid fines and advocating to the provincial government to reallocate the $4 billion of unpaid fines that exist within the provincial system right now, and advocating that monies be reallocated to municipalities to support some of the and offset some of the costs that we have in other areas. So that advocacy work is being done as well, and I think that would be something that our council at a future meeting could get behind Mayor Creelman and support some of his asks. So I'll work with Mayor Creelman to bring some of that forward, because I think that's, again, additional revenue for our community in a positive way. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, through your worship. Just to add on to that, because I'm on that committee, the POA committee, and our share, Dufferin County, is about just a little over $4 million that's outstanding. So it's quite significant. So
It's very significant. Okay, I'm not sure where we're at with that question, or do you want me to continue with? Okay, Ms. Minikila.
Okay, so thank you for allowing the team the grace to look into that. So while the percentage looks high, it really is that realignment into more appropriate budget lines. The net new ask for 2025 is $75,000. The breakdown of that is $60,000 for that vulnerability assessment from a cybersecurity perspective, and the other is $15,000, to implement our GIS and Esri.
Thank you, Ms. Minikila. Covers your question there. Was there any additional questions in the corporate services section? Councillor Stevens.
I'm struggling with this one. It's for the salary gapping, and I know it's quite significant, and it's almost 1% tax increase across the board for our residents. So I'm not saying our staff work great. I really enjoy working with our staff. I would just like to defer it for 1 year. I don't know the process, but it's a significant amount of money as well. So.
CEO Smith?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the comment or question is. The proposed salary gapping is reducing our salary budget and putting income or putting that money, redirecting it into our capital budget. So it's a net zero. If you're speaking about salary gapping, we're taking our salary budget, we're reducing it, and we're taking that reduction and putting it into our capital budget.
Councillor Stevens?
Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought it was the salary increase that the firm that, Market Channel brought forward, so that we would get our staff up to par and even with our comparators.
Two separate topics.
Then I apologize.
Okay, additional questions on corporate services? Councillor Stevens?
Then that other topic, is it built into this, or is that still to come to council?
Yeah, no, it's built in. We've been clear to council that when Marianne Love King, we would build all those recommendations into the budget, and they are reflected in the budget that we prepared at the 2.9% and has been reduced to 2.7%.
Okay, then no offense to any of our staff, I still have an issue with that. And I would just like that part deferred for 1 year. With the OPP costing and stuff, our budget is just too high.
I'll speak to that a little bit, and then maybe I'll look for staff guidance on this piece. I think the market review is an important exercise that council undertook, over the last few months. It came to council 2 months ago now, or 6 weeks ago, with the process and what the findings were. I think that this component is an important part of what we do, because if we don't do it now, we're going to be further behind when we do it later. This is an exercise not to increase salaries for staff. It's to get staff up to their equivalent municipalities and to make sure that they're paid appropriately according to market rate. If we fail to do that at this time, it's going to just get pushed out to a future year, and it's going to put us in a difficult predicament later. I think it's also imperative that we continue to ensure that our staff are paid appropriately based on market needs, to continue to be able to attract and retain the staff that we get. I would hesitate to remove that item from my perspective, because I think that's a bit of a slippery slope, and it's going to put us into a further deficit. Back a few years ago, when 5 of us were on previous terms of council, we were significantly further behind. We had a significant increase to get ourselves up to close to market, and this time the gap was significantly smaller. There are other municipalities who are way out of whack and now are looking at 12% increases just to try and get up to market level. So I have concerns with removal of that item. I think that staying on track with those things is as important with keeping up with our asset management. I think those are all pieces that allow us to continue to budget appropriately and to spread costs out over year. Councillor Stevens?
Thank you. Through you. I understand what you're saying, and I would agree, but this year I just find it extremely difficult to go out to the residents with over a 6% wage with the OPP involved, and that's just how I feel. So,
no, I understand your feelings, definitely. But again, I look at what's being proposed next year, and we're at 7.9% already next year. So deferring it to next year and moving that increase, that's going to put us into an awkward position next year at 10, 11, 12% and further behind. So, Councillor Stevens?
well, I mean, I'm not going to vote for a raise or an increase of 7.9% either. But I just feel that, timing was poor, especially with the OPP this year. That's all.
Understood. Additional comments, Deputy Mayor?
If I could, I'm not tracking with yourself, Your Worship, or with you, CAO Smith. The very fact is the staff salaries are going up. They're going to make more money next year than they make this year. That's a fact, right? So I don't quite understand how you're trying to level that up, but they will make more money next year than they make this year. Fact for sure. To you, Councillor Stevens, I appreciate what you're saying. And what I would expect then is that when we vote, you'll vote no against the budget, or you'll strip this out and vote no against the budget. And you should absolutely do that. My experience with this is we need to keep pace. I'm the cheapest guy on the planet, but the reality is if you don't keep pace, you'll lose good people. These people are all professionals. We have engineers sitting in the building. You don't just get to be an engineer. You have to go to school and invest your time. And we have fire experts in the back. People can make comments and throw stones at glass houses all they want, but we need to have the expertise that we have in the building. And so again, we all have respect for each other, but I can't vote against giving what should be market raises. We're in competition with other municipalities, and we need to keep our people. We need to make sure that we've got good people. Candidly, I've sat here long enough, and I've been frustrated on the other end of it. And right now, I think we're in a great spot. So I'll be supporting the financials, but I do hear what you're saying. I just think you should either strip it out and vote against that, or vote against the entire budget to mesh with your principles. But we are paying staff more money next year. So you're absolutely right.
Councillor Sherwood?
Yes, Your Worship. Just for everybody in the general community that's watching, the COLA that is being presented in this budget is 3%, correct? Madam Treasurer, we voted as a council.
Did you want to add something?
I will confirm that we put a 3% cost of living. I also confirm it's the lowest one in the county at this time.
Yeah, so again, this isn't hidden in the budget. We did approve the 3% COLA back when we gave staff direction as they were working towards the budget back in the summertime. So again, I'm just putting it out there because nobody's really thrown the figure out. And I just want to let everybody know, upon approval of this budget, all staff will get a 3% COLA increase, including council, yes.
CAO Smith?
I will just comment, Councillor Sherwood, you're 99.99% correct. Staff that are under a collective agreement have to negotiate their settlement. And we do have staff that are red circled for a variety of reasons, and they won't. So I don't want all staff to hear this and think something. But we appreciate your comment.
Yeah, just to go back, I was not really doing this to for staff. It was just more to let the community know and for transparency, because we're sitting here talking about wages and increases, but we hadn't put the figure out there. So the percentage.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sherwood. Corporate Services, Councillor Andrews.
No corporate service question, but just since we happen to be on this topic right now, and again, I think we've all had an opportunity to say what we want to say. You know, our staff are incredibly important for this municipality. For those of us, as you shared, you know, quite accurately, you know, for those of us in the previous term, you know, you go through somewhat of a change. You go through a Rolodex of staff, and when you finally get some great staff, this is not to say that we haven't had great staff, but we are in a very good spot right now. And it is a competitive world for those that are not only within the public sector, but also in the private sector. Maintaining appropriate compensation is really what the decision is here, and I think that has been echoed. We are in a very good spot. We approved previously the 3% increase. That is what it is, and this is where we'll stand moving forward with this budget decision.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Additional questions on corporate services, Councillor Stevens.
So I'm just sorry, through your worship, I just want the general public to realize the 3% COLA, cost of living, is different than what I brought up. So I just want to make sure people understand that there's two different things going on.
Yeah, understood. Okay, corporate services, additional questions? We're good in corporate services. Admin council committees, any question on that item? Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have just a quick question. It probably is to Councillor Stevens. Page 45 on the committee, the Access Orangeville Committee. Last year, you had professional fees of $500. This year, it's up to $4,000. I'm not sure what that's for, and if it's for training, is this a good time to do it when there's only a year and 3/4 left in the term of that committee? But I'm not sure what it's for. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens, are you aware what it's for?
I am not. I'm
Okay.
hoping Miss Doherty's on the line.
We're going to take a pause while staff looks into it. CAO Smith? Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. $45, I believe, is what Councillor McIntosh said. While that's being looked at, was there additional questions on the admin councillor committees? Deputy Mayor?
Your Worship, I'd like to put a motion forward that we cut all monies to Rick Stevens committees. Every single dime.
My committees might not like that.
Additional questions in that section? No, so we will just pause. Ms. Braun? No, not yet. Okay. CAO Smith? Oh, no, it's still 1 minute. Okay. Look, yeah, we could take a recess. Let's take a 5-minute recess at this point. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience as we just get back at her from our break. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Martel, who has an answer to the previous question from prior to break. Ms. Martel?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Post. As the question was in relation to the $4,000 ask for the Access Orangeville Committee, it is in relation to their recently approved Access Orangeville Committee work plan, where there was a request for a member to attend the Access Forum. So it's the cost of the conference and mileage to attend.
Understood. That makes sense. Thank you. Councillor McIntosh, are you good? Okay. Any additional questions under admin, council, and committees? We're looking good there. Okay, any questions under corporate allocations? Councillor Andrews?
Thank you, Your Worship. And this is a question posed to our treasurer, and hopefully we can get some clarification on this. This is looking at all of the budgets operationally and the professional development and association fees. And with the utmost respect of all of our staff in this municipality, I am a firm believer in professional development. I'm a firm believer in associating with the agencies that are tied to each one of our departments that we have, and the specialization and the professional components that are a part of that. I went through each one of them in each one of our departments, and in comparison to 2024 to 2025, I see an increase of about $154,000, which is about a 37% increase. Now, some of the departments, those increases are 150%, and we are talking small numbers. In other cases, 90%, 28.5%, 33.7%. And again, I could give you the page numbers, but this is in fact looking at each one of the departments' operating budget and just isolating each one of those lines. I guess the question I'm asking, there's a reason, no doubt, for it. There's inflationary pressures, as we just heard from Madam Clerk here talking about attending a specific conference. I know that that is part and parcel with the importance of the departments keeping up with changes that are happening in their expertise, aligning with the agencies and the organizations, waterworks, for example, wastewater, so on and so forth. But is there justification for some of those increases?
Ms. Braun?
So actually, I think I'm going to turn that question over to my colleague, GM Minichillo.
CAO Smith first.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a very good observation. And I would summarize it in two ways. One is that historically, our organization did not support staff to attend training conferences. There's an old adage, many you may have heard, if you train them, there's risk if you train them and they leave. There's risk if you don't train them and they stay. And I think that's an important why in the road, that we want to invest in our staff. We encourage them to do professional development. Now, all requests are vetted through the appropriate GM. If it's an extraordinary something, then I approve it. We want to send a message to our staff. We want the knife to be sharp, and having opportunities for professional development is part of that.
If I may comment, and CO Smith, I absolutely agree. I think it's important that we have cutting edge staff, those that in fact are connected to their profession. And they also bring back tremendous expertise and knowledge when they attend not only these conferences, but also having the alignment with the associations. And so I think it's important that we support the staff as we have done so. We are doing more, and I'm glad to hear it. But again, it was one of those calculations that, when it jumps off the page, you need to have that clarification. And I appreciate that clarification this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Back to committees, there is an emergency fund, and I see they've put it up a little bit, 2% this year. Not that I'm asking for that to be cut in this year, but can you take in consideration, we haven't used that $10,000 emergency fund in all my years on council. So I just wonder, can we either hold it at 10,000 or cut it back to 5,000, but stop putting a 2 or 3% increase to it, because we've not been using it. Pardon? No, because I was just 25?
Page 45 from the committees.
Okay, so if you look at the, the previous actuals for the emergency committee. We didn't use it in 2023. We didn't use it in 2024. I believe we didn't use it in 2022. We're putting small amounts of increase in there, like 10,000 went now last year to 10,400. This year it's 10,610. Why are we increasing something we have never used? I'm just saying that for the future. Either hold it where it is or reduce it is my recommendation.
Ms. Martell?
Thank you. With help from our finance staff, thank you, Rebecca. So this emergency committee, we don't actually have the committee. It's an in-case kind of a fund. We haven't fully decided what we're going to do with these funds. We are considering transferring it to reserves each year and putting money into those reserves so that we have it available should a large emergency happen and we have to implement our committee.
Councillor Sherwood?
So I know you're new to staff, and I'll tell you what the emergency fund was set up for. Back when the Raptors were in the finals, we had a big street party on Mill Street where we watched the final Raptors game. But we had no way of funding it, so that we had to go out to the community to ask for donations for the setup of the screen and the portable toilets. So we set up this emergency fund for such an event that, say, by any chance, the Leafs make it to the Stanley Cup this year, we can have a party. So that's what the emergency fund. It wasn't an emergency fund for emergency services.
Councillor McIntosh, I think, wanted to add something to that.
Yeah, way back when, that has always been a line item in the budget. We may have taken money from it for the celebration for the Raptors because there was some available. But like the clerk said, if there is an emergency in town and we have to set up the ELC center, that will quickly deplete that money. And I guess if we don't use it, it gets put into reserves, or in the case of the basketball or the Leafs, yeah, we'll do that. But if we do have something serious and we have to run the ELC, that 10,000, like I say, will disappear pretty quick. And I'm pretty sure when I was fire chief, it was 10,000 as well, or close to it. But I could be wrong, but I think it was. Thank you.
Councillor Sherwood?
Just to Councillor McIntosh, this was set up for a totally different thing. I think the emergency fund for what you're talking about may have fallen under the fire budget. No? This emergency fund was, it's not worded or labeled correctly. It wasn't set up for an emergency.
CAO Smith?
It feels that tonight the answer isn't great, but the answer is that it's called an emergency committee. We have $10,000 allocated. It's been there. It's there if we need it. If we don't, and we haven't used it for other things, it's not a fund that we use for other events. It ends up in our surplus and goes into capital reserves. So it's probably appropriate to keep it in the budget now. I will commit that we'll bring back better information to council so you have a good understanding of it.
Councillor McIntosh?
Yeah, Councillor Sherwood was correct. It was in the fire department budget, but it has obviously been reallocated to a separate item now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McIntosh. Any additional items in corporate allocations? We're looking good. Okay. So I think actually before I go on to the next topic, I'm just going to go back to the beginning and say, from all of the 5 divisions, is there anything that anybody missed that they wanted to talk about out of the 5 sections? So go through your notes quickly, Council, and just make sure. Oh, Ms. Savage, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Post, to Councillor Sherwood, you had asked a question as to why the parks budget was at a 13%. Mr. Cosgrove's not here, but he did mention that we have a one-time trail project that we have to correct. There is also the graffiti fund, as you know, vandalism. The graffiti fund, we think, unfortunately, will be put to good use. And there was also a reallocation. Let me check my notes. reallocated 40% of the manager's wages from facilities to parks for the amount of 77,000.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Your worship, have I got an opportunity to ask more questions or?
From the 5 sections? From the 5
I wanted
divisions?
to talk about debt. So should we go wrap
No,
up?
go
the
ahead,
5
go ahead and
section,
do that.
or we'll go to debt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so, debt. Da-da-da-dum. Explain to me again, because maybe I didn't catch this, Ms. Braun, why are we putting a debt in this year's budget of $7,349,000 for a fire station when we haven't made a decision? I might have just totally been asleep during that part of the presentation.
Ms. Braun?
So I think that the approach staff has taken to the fire hall is to not change any assumptions related to the fire hall until we know what we're going to be doing. It doesn't mean that we are going to be issuing that debt for the fire hall. But we need to fund every single dollar of capital expenditure, and that's how the project was funded previously. So we've just left the entire budget as it was previously contemplated.
Okay, so we're not going to be starting to get interest right off the bat. One more item regarding debt, Your Worship.
Yep, Councillor Sherwood.
On page 53, the GUDI upgrade, Goody, where the debt is $2,563,000, a well treatment. Does I thought the wastewater reserves paid for itself. Are we going into debt there because we have no money there?
Ms. Braun?
That's correct. The water and wastewater rate study identified which projects could be funded directly from the reserve. And in cases where we may not have quite enough money in the reserve, we'll have to issue debt and pay off those debt servicing costs from the reserve.
Just to follow up, so this isn't a placeholder. We're actually going to be going through this debt, correct?
If we spend the money, we will be issuing the debt, correct?
Thank you.
Councillor Andrews.
Your Worship, through you, just a very low-hanging fruit question to our General Manager of Corporate Services. This would be on page 240 in bylaw. And just looking for some clarification on service and lease agreements. I know the amount is small, but it's gone up by 115%.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll pass it on to the clerk.
Ms. Martel?
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Certainly. It's the increase for our new parking ticket software through GTechna.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Deputy Mayor?
Would it be worthwhile to talk about debt really quickly? Like, I think it's a good point that you brought up. I would just like to say, like, I completely bizarre statement, but bear with me. Debt is a beautiful thing. And debt is a beautiful thing for the town because it offsets increases in the year that it is, and then you pay it off and the asset is greater than what it was originally purchased for. So used properly, like, it's the most amazing tool. It's really important that we do it. So I think when people look at it, they shouldn't be afraid that we have this debt as long as it's manageable, which you took us through that it is. It's always a question that we ask, but I think as long as it's the right thing for the right asset, I think it's a brilliant thing that we do, and it shouldn't be viewed as a negative. And I just think it's worthwhile sharing that if people are watching and wondering.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Okay, additional questions on any part of the operating budget from any members of council? No. Councillor Sherwood? No. Okay, everybody's good? Okay, so the one other item before we move into the next section would be to talk a little bit about the OPP and the options that are there. And I'd like to just have a brief conversation to get a bit of an understanding of where council's feeling about it before we get into item 14 in the consolidated budget report, which it is one of those, we are going to have to fill it in there. So I don't want a motion at this point. I'd just like to have a little bit of discussion about the options that exist with the OPP. And I think I'll start on this conversation with what my recommendation would be going forward, which does differ a bit from what staff's recommendation is. I know staff's recommendation would be to leave the full $1 million from the province within the budget to allow support of capital projects and make sure that we're good in that way. The other option was to use all of it, which I also don't think is a great idea. My recommendation would be that council move forward with option C. And just to explain a little bit of that to the public and to council of why I'm feeling that way, I think that when we're looking at the temporary relief from the province, there's a lot of uncertainties that we don't know. I had a conversation with our MPP when this was announced, and the first question I asked is, well, I said, that's great to hear that we're getting $1 million, but what does that mean for next year? And the reality was there was a lot of uncertainty about what it means for next year and future years, because within that announcement as well, there was comment from the Solicitor General that they will be relooking at the way that OPP is built. And that was a commitment from the province at this point. So I don't know that it's fair to assume that this full amount will have to be added into the next year, because I think there's going to be a lot that comes up with OPP over the next 12 months from the province, specifically because the Solicitor General did identify that they had heard from 300 municipalities who were not happy with that increase to OPP, and they know that they can't move forward in the same path that they are. So I think the conservative approach would be to move forward with option C and use half of the amount of money to reduce the tax burden and put the other half away in case there is that uncertainty of next year. I think that leaves us in a strong position to reduce this year's impact to the taxpayer without depleting the full amount coming from the province at this point. So that would apply just over $500,000 towards the budget, would reduce the impact from the 6.6 to 5.32, plus the savings that we had from last night's meeting, which would get us to right at 5%. Ms. Braun, am I about right?
5.03%.
5.03. So we would move from that 6.6 down to 5.03 and allow us to move forward in that way. That would be my recommendation. Again, I don't want any motions at this point, but I'd love for council to have a conversation or ask questions at this point. So is there thoughts, Councillor McIntosh?
Thank you, Worship. I agree 100%. I think it's the way to go. There's just so many uncertainties. We don't know. It would be reckless of us to put the whole amount towards it. If something goes bad next year, we're going to be in the same situation we are this year. So I think doing half now and giving the taxpayers a bit of a break. They may not appreciate it because it's not a huge break, but it is still a bit of a tax relief. So I think that would be the way to go. I agree with you.
Thank you, Councillor McIntosh. Councillor Andrews?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the way you framed it, again, provides us with understanding of where we are today. There's speculation there could be an election at the provincial level next year, so that could change the whole playing field considerably. I think this is the prudent thing to do. It may not necessarily, as Councillor McIntosh has indicated, it may not necessarily be the news that our residents want to hear, but I think this is the best case scenario for us at this time. And it does give us, some padding, as I would use the term, for 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, I too am in favor of your proposed option. I'm going to be a little nitpicky here and wonder, I just don't like the 0.3. So can we take 50.5% and make it so that we have just a 5% tax increase, like rather than half and half? Is it possible to make it nice and round so that we just say we have a 5% increase and not 5.03 if we use that option?
Ms. Braun?
Yeah, just give me a few minutes to do some math on that.
Sounds good. In the meantime, we will turn it back to council for additional questions. Councillor Sherwood.
So if I could still, while she's doing that, like I say, I know it sounds nitpicky, but I'm all about even those 0.03. So we know that there's no way that the OPP is going to come back and say, no, now you're back up to your other rates. I think our neighboring municipalities and ourselves have made it very loud and clear that, we can't sustain those types of increases. So I think this is a very good in the middle, yes, we're going to have increases next year, but I really don't think it'd be the $1 million. So I'm really in favor of that if we can do just those little figure jimmies.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. Deputy Mayor?
You're looking at me like you knew I wanted to say something.
We've worked together long enough now.
Yeah, Councillor Sherwood, I'm completely aligned with your comments. I was trying to do the math in my head to figure it out myself, so I agree. Like, I think it just sends a different message to be slightly under 5 if we could. Shows that people are listening. The thing that does concern me though is if that number is true that we talked about earlier, the 7.1 or the 7.3, we're going to be sitting at 7.981% increase in 2026. And again, I know that we're at the preliminary stages, but I talked to the 6 of us that are sitting here, and that needs to be part of the consideration set. And we need to go eyes wide open that this could very well be. And, you know, just to be a negative Nelly, I think truly as an amateur economist that I joke that I am, I think we're in a lot of trouble next year in 2026, just as a country and what the economy is. We're heading towards a recession. I know I'm being very negative, but things like the dollar being at 51 cents, which it very well could be, things are going to be more expensive than I think even this budget has anticipated. And we should be expecting the worst. And I know I try and be positive, but I'm very concerned about where we're heading over the next 12 months. And we should all have on our minds that this may be worse than what we're suggesting as we all sit here today. The budget is a forecast, and I have a bad feeling we're going to be short.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Stevens?
Through your worship, I won't be near as negative as Deputy Mayor Taylor. But I mean, everybody's right. So I want to follow suit and go to option C. You think we crafted this? We didn't. This is all right on the fly, but I think we need to do what we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional commentary on the OPP portion? And then I'll see if Ms. Braun has some math. Ms. Braun?
Yeah, so if we reduce the contribution that was proposed from the 50% by $15,000, we'll end up at 4.99%.
Okay, I think council is good with that number.
So your worship, I believe we'd have to put a motion, or that's going to be part of your motion.
We're going to get to that. So they're going to.
Motion's in motion.
You got it. Their staff behind the scenes is furiously typing so that I have wording when we get to item 14. So we're not quite there yet. So before we get there, we do have to get through the consent agenda portion. The following items have been compiled under consent agenda to facilitate a single vote for council consideration. Council may remove any item from the consent agenda for individual consideration. Tonight's, we just have item 13.1 staff reports under the consent agenda. Was there any items that anyone wanted to remove from that to discuss? Seeing none. So can I get a mover and a seconder that all consent agenda items for the current council meeting listed under 13.1 staff reports and 13.2 correspondence be received or approved as presented, with the exception of any items which were removed, which we don't have any. So a mover and a seconder, Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Stevens. All in favor? And that is carried. And I'm hoping that now that we're at 14, there will be a note for me to move these numbers forward. So we are moving into the consolidated budget report. Give me 1 second here. Just want to make sure that I've got the numbers if I need to have them for this motion. So I can start to read it out that the 2025 consolidated budget CPS 2024-96, the recommendation is that report CPS 2024-96 2025 consolidated budget be received, and that council approve the 2025 consolidated budget as set out in option. So it'll be kind of C amended. So based on the amendments that were written. So I just want to make sure that I've got all of those. We've got great staff typing up behind the scenes here. All right. Okay, so the new recommendation is that report CPS 2024-96 2025 consolidated budget be received, and that council approve the 2025 consolidated budget as set out in option C of CPS 2024-96 dated December 10th, 2024 as follows. That council directs staff to add a one-time contribution to the general capital reserve in the amount of 509,242, and that council approve the 2025 operating budget for town services excluding police services with a property tax levy requirement of 39,342,245, and that council receive the 2025 billing statement from the Minister of the Solicitor General for the Ontario Provincial Police adjusted for one-time relief from the province at a cost of $5,077,223, and approve the 2025 operating budget for policing service inclusive of grant funding with a property tax requirement of $4,877,223, and that council approve the 2025 capital budget and approve in principle the 2026 to 2034 capital forecast as set out in the 2025 budget report presented on December 2nd, 2024, as amended on December 9th, 2024, adjusted for final year and carry forward actuals. And just for community's note, that will be a total consolidated budget impact of 4.99%. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Last questions or comments, Councillor Sherwood.
Just to clarify, Madam Treasurer, what is the proposed budget amount? 44,083 was the original one. So what is the
tax levy for 2025 will be $44,219,468.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Stevens.
Through your worship. I've been sitting over here contemplating my my thoughts earlier. I want to be united and I don't want to remove the item. I just want to be transparent and make sure that the public knew why I brought it up. But my, the staff are great. I certainly don't want to I don't want them to think that I was trying to remove any salaries from them. That wasn't my intent. I just wanted to be transparent, and that's all I can say.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stevens. Appreciate those comments. Any additional questions or comments from members of council? See, Deputy Mayor.
Just ever so quickly, I think just if I could, I want to congratulate staff on the budget that they put forth in the difficult times, and also to congratulate each of us, myself included, darn it. And why I would say that is my understanding is there's other municipalities that are tied to us within Dufferin County that are passing significantly higher tax increases than what this is. And I think it's commendable for us to be able to do this in essentially we're an urban center in this rural county. It's noteworthy to see where we are, and we'll all do the comparisons when they come out. But we're the lowest of the low right now in the area, and I think it's noteworthy.
Absolutely, Deputy Mayor, agreed. There are some of our local municipalities near us have, as you said, it just recently passed budgets significantly higher than where we're at right now. And again, I would echo your comments. Staff has done a great job putting forward the budget. It doesn't have any bells and whistles. It doesn't have any fancy stuff. We're moving forward with the stuff that was either approved previously, moving forward the work that needs to be done, and moving forward with ourselves as an organization in a positive way. I give a lot of credit to staff and the work that the finance team and all of the leadership team has done on this budget. And again, thank you to council for having really great conversation about this. We've come a long way, so I appreciate that. Any last comments before I call the vote? Okay, all in favor? And none opposed, so we're carried unanimously. Thank you, council. With that, we will move into bylaws. The recommendation is that all bylaws for the current council meeting listed under item 16 bylaws be read 3 times and finally passed. It is just the confirmatory bylaw for the operating budget meeting held tonight, December 10th. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Sherwood and Councillor Stevens, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor McIntosh, seconded by Deputy Mayor, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. We will see everybody back next Monday for a regular council meeting. Thank you all for joining us tonight.